Good morning, my friends. It is good to be with you. I'm already realizing something I tell people all the time, that it's medicinal to be in community together. And we miss it, right? We miss geographic community. We miss being able to see one another face to face and embrace and laugh together. So I'm thankful for you being here, and for those who are gathering who are from different places in the country. Um, so we're going to have a conversation. I'll share some thoughts, and then you, of course, can respond. I wanted to begin with a quote, with something that was spoken on November 29th. Um, the person said, "It's time to put away the harsh rhetoric, lower the temperature, and listen to each other again. To make progress, we must stop treating our opponents as the enemy. We are not enemies, we are Americans." That was spoken by President Donald Trump. No, of course it wasn't. Of course it wasn't. It was spoken by President-elect Joe Biden. So President-elect Biden did what a leader should do, what he certainly is needed to do in this moment in our history. He asked for people to come together. He asked for unity. And that's a word that I'm starting to hear a lot more of lately, in the wake of an election that is still inexplicably being contested by the current president. People like you and me were being asked to show unity to his supporters, to extend some instant olive branch of understanding that magically bridges this cavernous gap between us, one gaps that he is highlighting and nurturing and exacerbating, and a gap that many people who support him seem joyful about. It isn't just that they believe differently, but they believe differently with extreme prejudice, with malice. Now, I grew up as a Christian with the teachings of Jesus. And of course, one of the foundational teachings of Jesus, and really one of his most radical positions, was the command to love my enemy. And I wonder right now what that command, what that idea of loving my enemy, what it looks like when I pull it down from the lofty places of abstract thinking into the trenches of relationships with people. What does loving my enemy require of me? And what does it exempt me from? So that's the question I would like us to ask together as people of faith and morality and conscience, whether we are Christian or not, or once were or not. What do we owe those we have profound disagreements with? What are we, as people of conscience, what are we responsible for? And that may be the weakness in me. It may be my inconsistency. It may be my flaw, but our unity is not something I'm willing to offer unconditionally and without caveat, because I think unity necessitates deep connection. It necessitates a profound kinship, a true relationship. And we simply don't have unity with everyone. And we don't have unity with everyone equally. And you know this, we've been at this for 5 years now. And it isn't as though you and me and people like us haven't been working tirelessly to understand and to reach people, to appeal to people's sense of decency, to illuminate the damage that they might be doing to oppressed and vulnerable people. And it isn't as if we haven't been trying to invite people into something more redemptive. I think that's the work we do individually, and collectively as a community, that's who we're about. But this is the nuance, I think, of our enemies, whoever we perceive them to be. They aren't crafted in a single moment. We don't just have enemies randomly. We build a relationship with people over time. So in our case, or at least in my case, thinking about people who still embrace this malevolence, those people have chosen that again and again. They have abided atrocity after atrocity, right? They've embraced perpetuated lie after lie. So I know a bit about them. I have an experience with the people that I'm in conflict with or having trouble embracing. which is why, because I've seen so much, because there is such a body of work that we have seen, that's why I realize that there are not a lot of points of affinity, which makes unity very difficult. I wrote a book called The Bigger Table, and I'm a person of the bigger table. But to embrace people who I don't agree with, well, the heart of the bigger table is not exactly that. The heart of a bigger table is to lift up the humanity of people who have been dehumanized. The heart of the bigger table is to make sure that everyone is treated with the dignity that befits them being human. And so, like you, I'm deeply invested in the work of disparate community. I want to navigate difference. I want to see the inherent commonalities of all humanity. That's why I've been a pastor. That's why you're a part of this community, because this community believes deeply in that, in the intrinsic value of all people. But there are limits, I think, to what loving all people or loving our enemies really means. Yes, we're burdened to bring diverse people together. Yes, we're called by our various faith traditions to care for all human beings in our path, right? Yes, we're compelled to see everyone individually and to value their specific stories. That's who we should always be. But we are not obligated to have unity with actively hateful people to the point that we become complicit in the work of that hatred and in the damage that that hatred causes. So I don't believe that we are morally bound to make peace with hearts that dehumanize other human beings because of the color of their skin or their nation of origin or their gender or their orientation. And to me, to have still be embracing this person or this movement is to unapologetically have such a polluted heart, to be perpetuating inequity and stoking division and manufacturing discrimination in this very moment. So the Bible that I grew up on talks about this idea of repentance. That's a pretty religious word to me. And so a less theologically loaded word to repentance is sorrow. To have some knowledge of the pain that you've caused and a sense of regret for causing it. And that's what I want for people who dehumanize other people. I want them to have a moment of recognition and a sorrow for causing that harm to people. Because until someone can see the damage that they're doing and feel a sense of sorrow for it, they're going to keep doing it. And so unity is going to be very difficult for a person who is in that place. This is not some comic book movie where the supervillain suddenly comes to their senses, or they have some realization and they want to stop fighting the world and they want to work on the side of the heroes for goodness, right? They just have that, they wake up. This is someone, I think, that we struggle with who is in active toxicity. And I'm not going to be aligned with that, because I think that would be a slap in the face to people who I'm trying to make sure get a seat at the table, right? I think it would be a slap in the face to migrant children or to people of color or to LGBTQ human beings or to Muslims or to disabled people or non-Christians or for women to suddenly be a partnership or to claim unity with people who are hurting them would be to celebrate that, would be to perpetuate their wounds. So what do? I think the way we start before unity is we see the worth of all human beings. Because the worth of all human beings is not nullified by their conduct or their belief, right? We don't have to agree with them. Their worth is intrinsic, and that worth informs how we respond to conduct or belief. As horrible as it might be, seeing the value of the person in front of us, it doesn't require unity, it requires recognition of their value. And I think that keeps us from responding to monstrous behavior with other monstrous behavior. racists and bigots, they see other human beings as less human than they are because of some unchangeable part of who those people are. And we can't descend into that. And I think we can fully see people's humanity and still call them out for thinking and speaking and acting inhumanely. That's embarrassing. I think we can show decency and simultaneously declare ourselves distinct from the malevolence that they affirm and want to live with distance from that. So I don't think we owe people proximity. And here's the deal. I always took comfort in Jesus' teaching to love our enemies because it meant I was okay to have enemies. That it was okay that I didn't have to pretend that adversaries weren't present in my life. It was okay to be in conflict and engage disagreement. I just needed to not be a jerk while doing it. So I'm a jerk, and so are you. Not always, of course, but sometimes. And that sometimes is, I think, what we want to pay really close attention to, because if a loving expression of our beliefs matters to us, then motives matter. In a 1964 case deciding the nature of pornography, there was a Supreme Court justice named Potter Stewart, and he was talking about obscenity, and you may have heard the quote, but it's unintentionally hilarious. He said, regarding obscenity, I know it when I see it. So he couldn't define it, but he knew it when he saw it. And I want you to think about the last couple of days that you've lived through. And I bet you can recognize when either on social media or at home or on your job or with your friends or people that you know, when you've set out to hurt another human being and succeeded. If in any way you set out to hurt another human being and succeeded, congratulations, you're a jerk. So it isn't our theological position. It isn't our moral perspective. It isn't our political affiliation that is damaging or intrinsically hateful or negative. It is how we wield those things. All that to say that as we incarnate our beliefs and as we try to make our spirituality, whatever that looks like, we make it tangible that motives matter. So that means that I look across from someone I disagree with and I have to ask myself the questions. Am I trying to understand this person or am I trying to defeat them? Am I burdened to show them something that I've seen or experienced that they haven't? Or am I burdened to show them how much smarter or more enlightened I am than they are? Am I genuinely seeking to change their hearts, or am I trying to make them feel like an a-hole? The difference is everything about who I am. And the difference is, am I seeing them as valuable? So I think that's the challenge that we face. The beautiful part about it is, growing up, Jesus' command to love my neighbor as myself doesn't come with a guarantee that I'm not going to offend or bring discomfort or create turbulence. In fact, sometimes love does precisely those things. We have to. As we engage in justice, as we fight for equality, as we seek compassion for all people, we are going to experience that conflict. And it doesn't mean that we're not being loving. And it doesn't mean that we're not being the best version of ourselves. So I think the caution is not to cause conflict. I think the caution is do your best to do no harm in the middle of the conflict that exists. Most of us imagine that we're in the right. And I think being right is a really intoxicating drug that we can become addicted to. Trust me, I've been trying to kick being right for a long time, and that can be difficult when you're as right as often as I am. I'm only slightly joking. Here's my encouragement to you this week. There's a lot to reject in the world. And people of faith and morality and conscience, we're not required to make peace with hatred. We are not indebted to racism and bigotry and phobic violence. And the call that is universal to love our enemies does not necessitate abiding their cruelty. The only thing that we owe violent people is to see and respect their humanity in ways that they refuse for other people. I think we owe people authenticity and decency. And if we do that as lovingly as we're capable of, then we rest in the results of that. So you are not required to see hatred as acceptable.